Artificial Core have released the 8 talent trees that are going to be available in the upcoming alpha test, and we're going to go through these today to see which ones look interesting, which ones we might want to use on our characters, and just have a bit of theory crafting. Now, we do need to take into consideration a couple of factors when thinking about these. First of all is, are we going to be using these solo or in a group, or are we going to be wanting to use these for PvP or PvE? Because those are the things that we need to consider when looking at these, because I've already had a look through the talents and they do seem rather interesting, but they will benefit one particular playstyle over another. So we'll start with the warrior. So this talent tree gives us plus 5% damage just by selecting this. So with each of the trees we come with 5 tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and presumably we can only pick one per tier. We'll get 1 point per level to be able to assign to our talent trees, and in the upcoming alpha we'll be able to pick from 2 trees. In the early access we'll be able to pick 3 trees, but in the upcoming alpha just 2. So let's look at the warrior one to begin with. So we have stacking strength. The character deals 1% more damage for each positive effect lasting more than a minute that is active on them, up to a maximum of 5%. We have dynamic damage boost. The character deals 1% more damage for each ability used within the last 10 seconds, up to a maximum of 5%. And Rampage Rush. After entering combat, character gains 5% damage for 10 seconds. So out of these, let's have a look. So 1% more damage for each positive effect lasting more than a minute that is active, up to 5. So if you have 5 positive effects that last for more than 1 minute, you will get a bonus. So maximum of 5%. So you need 5 positive effects to be able to benefit from this. What counts as a positive effect? We don't know. Maybe a campfire buff. Now, I think maybe a campfire buff could benefit from this, because they seem to be long in duration. So it might not just be in combat effects there. So you could get that 5% potentially easily just by maintaining like your food buffs and your campfire buffs and such. So dynamic damage boost. This character deals 1% more damage for each ability used within the last 10 seconds, up to a maximum of 5%. So ultimately it's going to come down to how quickly you can spam your abilities. Character specific with the Legionary, I'd say that this is unrealistic to think that you could get more than 3 abilities spammed within 10 seconds, but I suppose there'll be some heroes that you can achieve that. And Rampage Rush. After entering combat, the character gains 5% damage for 10 seconds. So based on the way that camps were cleared there, I'd say that this one would probably be the most realistic. Either this one or stacking strength. It depends on what constitutes a positive effect. The camp clear on the Rampage Rush is good, because the camps where you'd kill a camp relatively quickly and easily, and then you'd rest, and then you'd go on again. So that could potentially be good in PvE. Maybe stacking strength in PvP if the positive effects are easy to come by. So multi-strike mastery. When dealing damage with an ability to more than one target, damage is increased by 2% for each additional target hit, stacks up 5 times and lasts for 10 seconds. So when dealing damage with an ability to more than one target, damage is increased by 2%. So you basically have to have an attack which is an area attack, like a cleave ability or something of that nature. So you get up to a maximum of 10% altogether extra damage. Healthy aggression. The character deals 8% more damage when their health is above 90%. I mean, that's kind of fun. Providing you're going to be able to keep your health above 90%. In my experience, it was seldom that you would keep health above 90% persistently. Even with a dedicated healer, we found when we were pushing camps, the healer was great, and don't misunderstand me, we had really good healers when we played last, but we found that the majority of the healing was done after the combat to restore our health to maximum before we started off on the fresh camp. So really it comes down to group play and how good the healing is going to be as the game progresses into the higher levels. And Adrenaline Rush. After killing an enemy, the character deals 8% more damage for 10 seconds. So this one sounds like a PvE kind of ability, or talent I should say. The camps, they had numerous mobs in them, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on. I think that this would beneficial in the PvE environment more than anything else. I'd say that it was easy to be able to stack that damage constantly, and if you're able to keep the momentum going from camp to camp, then potentially you could get an absolute boatload of damage if you were moving fast enough, and you could keep your health up high enough to be able to constantly grind through those camps. Then you could be destroying stuff. So that one feels like definitely a PvE ability. This one again PvE, but more focused on group play, and this is just a general one. I wouldn't say that one was very useful, this multi-strike mastery. Okay, so Executioner's Edge. The character deals 10% more damage to targets with health below 20%. I'm not a huge fan of abilities like this where you deal more damage to enemies under a specific amount. I don't know why, I just don't feel like I ever see the benefit of it, especially in PvP. I find that it's generally the case when people's down to 1/5 of their health, they're looking for an exit. They're not necessarily looking to stay in a fight. So I'm a little bit unsure about whether that one's beneficial. That being said, I don't typically play characters, heroes and classes that generally would use this, so I might be wrong on that. So, let me know your opinion on generally speaking abilities like this. Okay, so we now have Resilient Fury. If the character takes damage exceeding 30% of their maximum health within 3 seconds, they deal 10% more damage. The effect lasts for 10 seconds. So that would be a big chunk of damage in 3 seconds, and I imagine that would probably be really useful if you were taken by surprise by somebody who, like, say an assassin class, like, was it the Infiltrator? I think it is. That's the assassin class for Bomber, isn't it? So if the Infiltrator, they rocked up with some of their passive masters, and there's some interesting ones for the assassin, and we'll come to that shortly. So that could be a good counter to being taken by surprise by some assassin character. So it definitely feels like this is a PvP sort of related talent. Anti-heal. Damage dealing abilities reduce the effectiveness of healing by 40% for 3 seconds. So again, this feels very much like a PvP related trait. So if you're in group PvP in particular, or anyone with self heal, then this is going to be useful because it will negate 40% of that healing, and you don't have to do anything for that other than use your abilities. So that's a pretty cool one. I like that one. But also there are some PvE mobs that do have the healing with them. So again, that I think if I was to pick one of these, gun to my head, anti-heal would probably be the best one to take. Generally because I'm more of a PvE related person anyway, so I think that this has got the multi-function in there. Right, tier 4, we have Fighting Spirit. So every 2.5 seconds the character spends in combat, they gain 1% attack power or spell power. So that's an adaptive effect there. And the maximum you get is 10%. So every 2.5 seconds a character spends in combat, they gain 1%. So 25 seconds in combat, then you have a maximum, an increase of 10% attack power. So that's an all-round. Literally an all-round there. So long as you're spending 25 seconds in combat, I'd probably say that given the fights that we've experienced while playing the previous tests, 25 seconds is quite a long time for fighting a camp, so potentially not going to get the benefit from that, doing smaller camps, but boss mobs perhaps, field bosses, or PvP, that's definitely something that's going to be quite useful. Now it doesn't say. Now the thing is with combat as well is that combat actually the status of combat does seem to last for quite a while. So you have the potential to jump from camp to camp. So it depends on the tempo of your fight. If you've got the resources, again, as we've mentioned with the previous tiers, if you've got that resource to be able to go camp to camp to camp, you could potentially build up a lot of damage that you can take with you and clear very, very quickly. It'd be interesting to see how this one combined with this adrenaline rush may work. So we can potentially think, right, after killing an enemy, the character deals 8% more damage for 10 seconds. So if we jump from killing the last one to jumping on to Fighting Spirit into another camp, perhaps. I mean, I might be stretching here, I might be really reaching, but that's what I'm thinking. Okay, so Life Force Augmentation. The character gains an additional attack power or spell power. It's equal to 1.5% of the maximum health or mana. So that's quite an interesting one. A very general all-round there that's suitable for all situations situations: PvP, PvE, solo, and group play. There's no issues there with any of those environments because it's just based on your maximum health or mana. Plain and simple, you get more damage, which I think is pretty cool. And then we have kill streak empowerment. For each enemy killed, the character gains 0.1% with a maximum of 10% attack power or spell power. All stacks are lost on death. So this one, you get a maximum 10%, but you have to kill 100 mobs to be able to get that. So, or 100 enemies. I mean, it technically could be people. So if you're able to do that, then great. I didn't find that we were dying too frequently when we played last. There were some stupid mistakes and we did die, but I mean, is 100 mobs realistic to maintain that 10% buff indefinitely? Possibly. In a group, I suppose you're going to stand more of a chance if you have a healer keeping you alive. But I think the cautious player in me probably likes this one better. So that's the one I would probably pick if I was picking this tree. So tier 5 then. Charge Catalyst. For each ability used by the character, allies, or enemies within a radius of 10 meters, the character gains charges for 5 seconds. At 10 charges, the next ability will deal 20% more damage. Now this one sounds a lot of fun because this is not just the abilities that you cast. This is the abilities that your party casts, the other people around you, even the enemies, that all of those that they cast will contribute to this. So you could quite easily get those 10 charges, I imagine, and then 20% bonus damage on the next ability. That sounds quite fun, and that's good for PvP, PvE, maybe better in group play than it is in solo play for sure. But it's definitely a good one. Okay, so now we have True Strike. Every third basic attack deals an additional 3% of the target's current health as true damage. Now that one I like. I do like true damage abilities. They, go through armor, do actual physical damage to the health, and plain and simple, nothing more than that. Definitely will be good in PvP for sure. Maybe in PvE. I'm not sure how much armor a lot of the mobs carry, and in terms of group and solo, it doesn't make a difference. I think that will be fine to be used for any scenario really. And Bloodthirst, the character gains an additional 5% attack power or spell power for every 15% of their missing health. I don't like abilities like this. As you probably gathered from the previous abilities, the damage based on health, it doesn't work for me. I don't like it, but still, it's in terms of usefulness, maybe in 1v1 PvP, that could be quite useful, just to when it comes down to the wire, you just need that extra bit of damage perhaps. But other than that, I'm not a fan. I'd probably go with True Strike, with Charge Catalyst being my second choice on that one. So that's the entirety of the warrior tree. So all in all, I'm not super pumped about this for the characters that I play. I have played the Legionary in previous tests. I really enjoy the Legionary. I'm going to be looking at playing another Warmonger class, which is the Shaman, coming up in this next test, providing that I get an invite. So Eugene, please send me an invite. Yeah, but for other classes like the Destroyer, for example, then I imagine this one is going to be really, really useful for classes like that. And maybe even the Infiltrator, depends on how that plays, of course, we don't know, but that's the way. So if you have any thoughts on this particular spec, this talent tree, then let me know in the comments. Which ones would you pick from each tier? How would you choose if you were to theory craft this? Which ones work well with each other? Okay. Now, let's have a look at the Assassin. So the Assassin gives you 5% physical or magical crit chance. So for our tier 1, we have Lurking Precision, and this increases the physical or magical critical strike chance by 1% every 10 seconds. So we have Lurking Precision that increases the physical or magical critical strike chance by 1% every 10 seconds outside of combat. Maximum 50% works on first damage. So this is a curious one. Definitely suits an assassin, as you would imagine with the assassin build, and it allows somebody to stalk somebody in the shadows, and finally, when they find the prey, unleash a massive 50% bonus damage. And I think that works really well. And we're looking at like 500 seconds. So like, what is 500 seconds in minutes? Is it like 6 minutes? No, that's 8 minutes. So as long as you're out of combat for 8 minutes, then you're going to land a nice big opening hit. So really, with with the so it certainly feels like this is a PvP related ability. I can't see this working in PvE because the fights in PvE are going to be more frequent. You're not going to get the chance to build up a full crit, but generally overall you will be increasing the damage, you know, on the whole, but you may only get like 1 or 2% between fights. But for PvP, definitely, if you're out hunting people, that sounds like a good choice. Probably maybe a solo ability more than anything else, but there's no detriment to being in a group. Okay, so Shadow Dance. After using a skill, the next auto attack has an increased physical critical strike chance by 10%, and the cooldown on that is 2.5 seconds. So this one's interesting. After using a skill, the next auto attack has an increased physical critical strike chance by 10%. So you use an ability, you do more damage. Easy mode, there's nothing more to it. Works in all scenarios, PvP, PvE, solo, group, no difference there. And finally, Shadow Strike. After landing a critical strike, the character gains 10% physical or magic critical strike chance. That's for 5 seconds. I don't like this. It sounds useless. I mean, I know that critical strike is good, critical strike chance, but let's say you have 0 critical strike to begin with. And I know that won't be the case, but just to simplify things, if you have 10% critical strike chance, so you need to get that initial 10% chance in the first instance. So you know you've got one hit in 10 on average is going to hit, and then on top of that you get this extra 10% critical strike chance. So then what is the probability of you then getting another one? So it's going to be slightly higher than the previous strike chance, but still incredibly low. So I don't know how I feel about that one. I'm not a mathematician. I'm sure there's some mathematician in the comments that can let us know what the chances are and if this is actually an effective trait, basically. So I think I like this Shadow Dance the most. It seems the most reliable and consistent of all of them. Okay, so tier 2, we have Bloodthirsty Edge. Killing an enemy increases flat armor penetration or magic penetration for 10 seconds. So that's pretty cool. It feels like this is going to be more of a PvE related, but certainly PvP group combat this could benefit for. Piercing Onslaught. The character gains a stacking buff when their ability deal damage to an enemy, granting 1 flat armor penetration or magic penetration per stack, up to 10 stacks, and the stacks last for 7 seconds. So I think the armor penetration and magic penetration is actually pretty significant. I'm quite sure that that's going to make a big difference. Just trying to think back to how the armor was working, and I'm quite sure that the numbers for the armor values were quite low. I could be wrong, but you know, we like going through armor and going straight to taking the health off them. So anything that can do that, it's a bonus. PvP, PvE, group, solo, very neutral, very, very neutral. You can use it in all scenarios, it's going to make no difference. Okay, so Critical Affliction. If the character deals critical damage to a target affected by their periodic damage effect, the next 2 ticks of that effect will also deal critical damage. So that's an interesting one. So if a character deals critical damage to a target affected by periodic damage, so a dot, the next 2 ticks will deal critical damage. So I like that one, but it does kind of pigeonhole you into heroes that have dots, damage over time stuff. There'd be no reason to pick this one if you had a character that didn't have a dot. Basically, that'd be just dumb. But if you do have that character, then certainly that would be an interesting option, but it's very, very specific. But it would work in PvP, PvE, group, solo play. There's going to be no impact on that one. Okay, so we are now looking at tier 3. So we're looking at the Predator. When the character attacks an enemy without allies nearby, they gain 10% armor penetration or magic penetration and deal an additional 50% physical or magical critical damage power against this enemy for 5 seconds. So when the character attacks an enemy without allies nearby, so they've got to be solo to begin with. So this is kind of important that in a group it's useless, this one. So that's the sort of the trade-off you have to make when you're choosing this one. But this one actually is quite good. So if you think about this, this is for a solo player. Also, we looked at this lurking precision, and this one, in my opinion, is good for a solo player as well. So can you imagine having this one where you get that up to the 50% extra damage? So 50% critical strike chance, and then you combine that with this, providing that critical strike hits, and because 50% addition on top of what you already have is quite high, I'd say. And then you get the armor penetration or the magic penetration, and then deal an additional 50% physical critical damage power. That's good. There is a cooldown of 20 seconds on there, but I think with these kind of skills, that's reasonable. That'd be too OP if it didn't have a cooldown. And I think we all agree that this one is a PvP related ability. PvE is fine, it would work, but I don't think you'd get the most out of it. But let's have a look at the other ones, because this might be the best of a bad bunch, who knows. Okay, so backstab. The character gains 10% armor penetration or magic penetration and deals an additional 50% physical or magical critical damage power to enemies from behind. Right, so how is this one different to that one then? So the character gains 10% armor or magic and deals an additional 50% physical or magical. So as long as you're attacking them from behind, then you get all the benefits of this one without the problem of needing to be solo, basically. So if you're in a group, then realistically you could navigate around to kill someone from behind or attack someone from behind. Solo, yeah, so this is more of a PvP in a group, I'd say. PvP in a group, PvP solo. So those are the choices that you have to make. Surprise attack. When the character disappears using camouflage or invisibility from the enemy's sight for 2 seconds during combat, their next ability or auto attack gains an additional 30% physical or magical critical strike chance. So again, this is going to pigeonhole you into a weapon spec that has a stealth or camouflage ability. So ultimately that's going to narrow down the options for you. So I couldn't realistically go a legionary assassin. That silly as that sound. In the first place, who would try that? But if I wanted to, it would limit my options significantly. Although maybe I need to try that. But again, this does feel a lot like a PvP related ability. Like all of these feel PvP, but group or solo, it's not going to make any difference. Okay, so tier 4, Ghostly Reflexes. Is that an X? Is that spelled right? I think that's an X. My eyesight's bad. Yeah, Ghostly Reflexes. Character can notice every stealth activation in a 30-meter radius. That's good. Definitely a PvP related one. Unless there's some PvE mobs that use the stealth, but that one's quite a good one. So anti-gank, anti-surprise attack, anti-ambush. Giant Slayer. If the character attacks an enemy with a maximum health greater than the character's own and 2 times for the monster, the enemy receives 10% increased damage from that character. Okay, so yeah, that's like a Giant Slayer. Well, yeah, it's called Giant Slayer. You attack someone with more health than you do more damage to them, plain and simple. So yeah, that could work in PvP or PvE. Probably, given the level ranges of combat that would likely happen, I'd say it's probably more focused on PvE, but the monsters do need to have 2 times more for you. But maybe it's a good anti-tank thing. So yeah, okay, I'll re-say that. I think it's probably useful for both PvP and PvE. So it's an anti-tank trait. Blade Fury. When landing a critical strike, the character deals an additional 30% of the damage to surrounding enemies within 2.5 meters. That's good. That's a very sort of standard and consistent, reliable ability. You critical strike, you do damage to the surrounding enemies. So if you're a cautious player, Ghostly Reflexes, Anti-Tank, Giant Slayer, Blade Fury, more damage, AoE damage. Those are your choices. And finally, tier 5, we have Crit Stacker. So non-critical auto attacks grant a buff that increases the chance of physical or magical critical strike by 1% for 5 seconds, which is consumed upon landing a critical strike. The effect can stack up to 100%. So you're going to need a really high DPS for this, because you're going to have to do 100 attacks in 5 seconds to be able to get that to stack up to 100%, right? And I'm not misunderstanding that. 100 auto attacks, so non-critical auto attacks grant a buff that increases the chance physical or magical critical strike by 1% for 5 seconds. Yeah, I can't read that anyway. You need to, unless it's like the cooldown refreshes each time you hit, that would probably make more sense. So it's not like you don't have to do 100 in 5 seconds. That's just ridiculous. It must reset the cooldown every time you attack. That's got to be it, right? But I like that. That's a good one. This is an ability that I would take. I like the increasing crit chance. It's kind of like opening loot boxes where you're guaranteed after you've spent $400. Okay, so Blade Master. When the character scores a critical hit, they gain a stack of Blade Master. At 5 stacks, their next ability deals 20% increased damage and consumes all stacks. Okay, so that's interesting. Probably good in all environments. I don't like it as much as the Crit Stacker, but still, each to their own. There's probably some build that would benefit from that. If you've got a high critical damage. I mean, when you combine it with some of the previous ones, maybe you can get that crit chance up really, really high. I'm quite sure that there'll be some people who manage to get a crit of near 100%. You know, that's just how people work in games like this. They find ways to make sure that they've got the highest crit chance possible, and that's going to be absolutely insane. Okay, so Disruptive Strike. If the character deals damage to an enemy that exceeds 30% of the enemy's health within 3 seconds, the enemy is unable to use dash abilities for the next 5 seconds. So I don't know how I feel about this. I genuinely don't know how I feel about this. Like, I'm just thinking over all of the heroes that we've had available, and there may be like the it may be like the Infiltrator, which has the dash abilities, and the Bomber's got that kind of healing dash. I don't know if that counts, but I don't know. It seems like it's a very specific scenario that's not going to come up very often. You deal 30% damage, and yeah, so I mean, I guess if you do have one of those irritating heroes that is dashing around, then giving them that big hit where they might think, oh crap, I need to get out of this situation or I'm going to die, then that might be really useful for ending them. So yeah, it's not a bad one actually. It's not a bad one. I think PvP this, you know, it doesn't matter solo or group, but definitely beneficial in PvP, I'd say. So I'd probably choose Crit Stacker as my first choice there, Disruptive Strike as my second, and Blade Master as my third. But they're all pretty good. This all being said, I don't think that I really enjoy assassin classes, so it's unlikely I will ever use these. So for people who do play assassin classes, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on all of the different builds. Like, what build would you use, and which ones do you think chain together really well to get the highest possible damage output? Like, we could look at sustained high damage output or burst damage. I think personally I'd be interested in like a burst damage build to see what that looked like. So let me know in the comments what you think is going to be the ideal build for an assassin. Okay, so support. This gives you a 5% movement speed. So to begin with, on tier 1 we have Aura of Ferocity. Increases the outgoing damage of character and nearby allies by 5%. Only works if allies are nearby. So straight away we know this is required to be in a group. This is useless solo. It absolutely does nothing if you're by yourself. But then PvP and PvE works fine. Warden's Protection. Character and nearby allies receive 5% reduced damage from all sources. Works only if allies are nearby. Again, need to be in a group. And Empowering Presence. Character and nearby allies receive 5% movement speed. Works only if allies are nearby. So this is literally telling us straight away that this is a talent tree which needs to be group play. Tier 2, Energized Bastion. Shield applied by the character. Energized Bastion. Shields applied by the character grant target 10% attack speed for the shield's duration. So hopefully that can be self-cast if you're solo, but otherwise, you know, that's just a support thing. Otherwise, it's only going to be used when you're in a group. But you know, any scenario, PvP, PvE, that would work. Dynamic Fortress. Shields applied by the character grant the target 15% armor for the shield's duration. Okay, it's interesting. Group play though, unless you can self-cast. Of course, unless you can self-cast. And Mana Savior. If the character interrupts an enemy's ability, restore 5% maximum mana to the ally with the lowest mana. So there we go, it's a mana redirect. But again, it's all group play. Tier 3, Coordinated Assault Tactic. Character's abilities apply a charge to the target upon reaching 3 charges. An auto attack from the ally against the target will stun it for 2 seconds. Again, this is attack from an ally. I mean, and it's great that this sounds like a really, really good ability to have. And you know, having that hard CC, fantastic. You know, people hate CC. It's so overpowered. But yeah, you need this. This is definitely a group. I mean, you could probably guess from the fact it's called support that it's a group talent tree. My biggest gripe, back to that one, delete that. Hard control effect. No, hard control expert. When the character hits a target with crowd control, after the effect expires, the target gets marked. An auto attack from an ally against the marked target will heal the ally for 5% of the maximum health. That's a good one as well. That's a good one. Providing you've got that CC in your kit to begin with, then that's useful for expanding your healing to the group. Now we have Weakening Curse. Enemies affected by the character's movement impairing abilities deal 15% reduced damage for the duration of the effect. So that one you could probably do solo. Yeah, that's probably the only one that you could do solo. Enemies affected by the character's movement impairing giant abilities deal 50% reduced damage. So if you can slow the enemy, 15% reduced damage. Sentinel's Embrace. So we're on tier 4, Sentinel's Embrace. Grant character and nearby allies 10% increase to their primary attribute. Works only if allies are nearby. Again, great all-rounder, not good by yourself. Amplified Energy Matrix. All positive effects applied by the character within a duration of 1 minute or more become 15% stronger. That's a good one. That's a good one. 15% extra on anything that's over a minute. So again, it comes back to what, constitutes a positive effect. Are we talking like campfire buffs? Who knows? Insight. The player's wards last twice as long and reveal 50% more of the fog of war. That's a good like anti-ambush kind of thing. That I like vision. That's a nice one. And okay, so tier 5, Amplify Weakness. Damaging abilities apply a mark to enemies for 5 seconds, increasing their damage taken from all allies by 10%. That's a good one. Again, group only. Mark of Vampirism. Damaging abilities apply a mark to enemies for 5 seconds. Damage dealt to the mark target grants the character's allies vampirism equal to 3% of the damage dealt. So that's really good. So if you're in a group, you've got that high DPS, especially if they've got a lot of health, like a boss mob or something like that, then using this could give that like extra group sustain, as long as you've got a damaging ability. That's it. So that's quite a nice one. I like that one. And Radiant Ascension. Using the ultimate ability grants character and nearby allies invulnerability for 2 seconds. Okay, yeah, that's a kind of a get out of jail free card, I suppose. If you're in the thick of it and you're gonna die, then that's a good one. I do like the Mark of Vampirism the most though. But yeah, this is an interesting one, the support tree, because if you were to pick this, you need to make sure that you're dedicated as a support and you're going to be in a group. The redeeming feature of this, though, is that all of these things are really beneficial to anybody who has you in their group, so long as it's appropriate for your weapon spec type, like bomber for example, then I think that you would be an asset to any party by having this. It's just that if you're left by yourself, then you've basically got a wasted tree. If you're a lone wolf and you like to do your own thing, then this is not going to work. You basically wasted a talent tree. So are there any support players watching the video? And what do you think? How do you feel about committing to this support talent tree when it comes to the requirement for it to be useful in group play, to the detriment of you not having a useful talent tree otherwise? Okay, onto the medic class. So for anybody who thought the support class was specifically for the healers, you are sadly mistaken. So this gives you 10% heal and shield power, and we will probably deduce that the medic and the support might go hand in hand, but let's have a look through it. So tier 1, Luminescent Grace. Increase healing and shielding effectiveness by 10% when the character's mana is above 80%. Interesting. All round kind of ability. All situations, PvP, PvE, solo, group. That's all there. Pretty standard. As long as you got more than 80% mana, then it's effective after that. Useless, wasted. So it comes down to whether you can keep your resources up or not. Now we have Serene Respite. If a character has not used any healing or shielding abilities for 10 seconds, their next healing or shielding ability will be 3% stronger, up to 15%. That's all right. That one. That's all right. That's a good one to go into a combat with. As long as you sort of pace in your healing and shielding, then if you can sort of tempo it, so you're just casting one heal or shield every 10 seconds, then they're going to be much stronger. So I think that will take a more experienced and skilled healer to be able to do that, but I'm absolutely confident that someone, many people who dedicate to that healing support role will be able to manage that without breaking a sweat. And Harmonic Trade-off increases healing and shielding by 10% but reduces damage by 10%. So it's an interesting one if you're not intending on doing any damage whatsoever, then that might be a great one. But you're kind of tied to being in a group that way, because if you ended up going solo, then it might make things difficult. You can't heal the mobs dead generally, unless they're undead or something, but that might be a different game. Yeah, generally speaking, you can't heal people dead, but you can heal slowly over time when the enemies are dead. So that's my view on that. Tier 2, Symbiotic Mending. Healing a target also heals the character for 10% of the amount healed. Does not work for self-healing. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, a bit of like bonus healing for you when you're healing somebody else. Bit of a kickback, bit of commission on the healing. So obviously that's group play only. That's not going to work by yourself solo. Now we have critical attunement. Critical healing applies a healing over time effect to a target for 10 seconds, equivalent to 10% of the amount healed. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so you get the outgoing healing plus an additional 10% over 10 seconds, so an extra 1%. That's kind of cool. I can see that combining with some other talents from trees that we're going to look at in a minute. Aegis Retribution. Critical healing applies a shield to a target for 10 seconds, the equivalent of 10% of the amount healed. So that's pretty cool as well. Doing that critical healing and then giving them a shield to boot. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of a selfish way of looking at things, but I like the symbiotic mending. I think more health to go around is probably better overall, because if your healer's dead, then you're not getting healed, so you may as well keep the healer alive as best you can, and if they can help keep themselves alive while keeping you alive, then I think that's the winner right there. Now, all these fine in PvP and PvE. There's no, I think that's true for these ones as well. It doesn't make any difference. It's very, very versatile. Okay, so tier 3, Purifying Rejuvenation. When removing a negative effect, restore 10% of the missing health to the target over 5 seconds. Okay, that's good. So you're using a cleanse ability on an ally, then 10% health bonus. Benevolent Echoes increase healing and shielding by 4% for every unique target healed or shielded within the last 10 seconds. So increases healing and shielding by 4% for every unique target healed within the last 10 seconds. Okay, so it sounds like the more people you heal, the greater the heal gets by the time you get to the last person. So you heal, like, say, the assassin in your group and get the increased shielding and healing, and then you heal the DPS or off tank, and they get even more, they get 8%, and then you heal the tank and they get 12%. I think that's the way that there is a max of 12% there, so it kind of makes sense that they've based it on a party of 4 perhaps. Does that sound right to everybody? And Cleansing Touch. Remove a negative effect from a nearby ally with the lowest health. Cooldown 60 seconds. Okay. So I'm wondering if this is actually a active ability or a passive. I mean, I'm sure these are all passive traits, aren't they? So do you think it's just like auto ticks every 60 seconds? Bam, remove a negative effect from a nearby ally. Probably is the case. I think I like this Cleansing Touch. It's kind of like low maintenance, I suppose. Well, I suppose everything's low maintenance because it's passive, but I think this one's probably the one I would choose. Okay, so tier 4, Chrono Fortification. The duration of shields applied by the character is doubled. Yeah, no, that's speaks for itself. Double shielding, plain and simple, no cooldown. Works in all environments, all settings, PvP, PvE, the works. Overflowing Barrier. 20% of the character's overhealing becomes a shield. Maximum shield strength is equal to 10% of the target's maximum health for 20 seconds. So I like this one as well. Being able to overheal and it become a shield, that's really good. Ultimately, I'd probably say that if you were to choose between these two, then it comes down to whether your character's primary abilities focus on healing or shielding. Ultimately, that's it really. Shield Master. The character's shield applying abilities now have 2 charges. So yeah, these clearly we've got 2 that are focused on shield casters and 1 on healers. And tier 5, Mystic Transference. Healing an ally increases the effectiveness of the next damaging ability by 15%. Damaging an enemy with abilities increases the effectiveness of the next healing by 50%. Okay, that's good. So that's kind of like, I'm thinking definitely Paladin here. Paladin who can heal and attack. So you basically, you attack them, you get more healing, you heal, you get more attack, and it just bounces between those 2 kind of states. I wonder if you can sort of chain that so that you're attack heal, and you get the bonus from each of those every time you do it. That might be interesting. Yeah, I like that. I do like that one. Okay, so Ultimate Resonance. Okay, so Ultimate Resonance. Using the ultimate ability reduces the cost of healing abilities by 90% for 20 seconds. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so pretty simple. just cast your ultimate cheap spells, or cheap healing abilities, that is. So you do definitely need to be more of a healer than anything else, because you want to make the most of that. If you've got multiple healing abilities, then that will be really helpful. And finally, focus healing. Each character's healing or shielding used on the same target increases the healing and shielding used on the same target by 5%. The effect stacks up to 5 times and lasts for 15 seconds. If an ability is used on a different target, then the buff expires. So if you've got a buddy, your BFF, and it's just the two of you going around, then definitely that one is a good one. That way you can get them like an extra 25% increase to the healing and shielding, and keep your significant other alive. So I like this tree. Because there's abilities in here which sort of say to me, okay, well, I'm a paladin, I want to be fighting people, and I want to be, able to heal as well. So I'll take this mystic transference, or I want to be whatever the dedicated healer is going to be. There will be some kind of focused healer, and we can say, okay, well, let's get this one, and we'll just make my BFF healthy forever. So I do like that one. Again, like the same question is, like, people who are dedicated healers, what route would you take with each of these tiers? Which ones would you pick in your build? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so the Mage passive talent tree. So this gives you a flat 10% maximum mana. We all like mana, don't we? Tier 1, we've got Emergency Rewind. This reduces the cooldown of abilities by 10% when the character's health drops below 50%. This is very reminiscent of the other damaging trees, where you get more damage output when your health drops below. You know my views on that. I'm not a big fan of that kind of ability, but that's me personally. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's just truly me. Mana Flow increases the character's resource regeneration by 5% for each ability that's on cooldown. Okay, I like that one. Good resource management. You spam all your abilities, bam, 5, 10, 15, 20. How many abilities we have? 20, 25. Yeah, so you can't go wrong with that. And then finally, on this tier, we have Harmonic Trade-off, reduces resource cost of abilities by 10%. So just a straight up 10% reduction, plain and simple. Nothing fancy. I do like the simplicity of that one. You know where you're at with it. So I think maybe I'd be picking either Mana Flow or Harmonic Trade-off, either or. Tier 2, we've got Arcane Insight, reduces the cooldown of all abilities by 20%. Straightforward. I like that. I like simplicity. You know where you're at. I think I could probably see myself going Harmonic Trade-off and then Arcane Insight, just because you don't need to worry about anything. It's just is what it is. Cooldown's 20% down. Then we have Slaying Momentum. After killing an enemy, ability cooldown is reduced by 1 second. Simple and straightforward. Vengeance of the Interrupted. If the character's ability is interrupted, their next ability within 6 seconds will cost 0 resources. So yeah, you get your ability back if you get interrupted, no cost. Because we've all been in that situation where we've tried to cast our ultimate ability in some game and we've been interrupted, and we get so mad because that had a big cooldown and that cost a lot of resources to cast. So if you've ever been in that situation where you raged at losing your ultimate, this might be the one for you. Me personally, 20% cooldown, that's pretty much a no-brainer. Second choice, Slay Momentum. And all of these so far, they're very much versatile in any situation. So tier 3, Mind Shatter Resistance. Ability interruption effects have a 75% reduced duration on the character. So that's interesting. So if someone silences you, the duration of that silence is going to be significantly less. So anti-CC there, very good. I'm going to say Etheric Redirection. Etheric? I don't know. But anyway, 10% of incoming damage is redirected to mana instead of health. That could be pretty cool. So your mana is an additional health pool in essence. So that could be good if you were trying to be a little bit more of a tanky caster, I suppose. Mana Shield. Gain a shield equal to 10% of the maximum mana. The shield charges after 10 seconds out of combat. Oh, that's cool having that shield. I'm not sure how useful that would be because combat can potentially be lengthy, but I'd say that's probably more of a PvE focused ability perhaps. But none of them are bad actually. None of them are bad. I would probably and likely opt for Mana Shield actually if I was to gun to my head, and then second choice would be Mind Shatter Resistance, but ultimately would depend on the hero and the weapon spec that you were playing as to which one was useful, because potentially this one would be a good shout as well. Okay, tier 4, another word, is that a real word? Matheric Reservoir, sure that just means something to do with mana. So anyway, increases the mana resource regeneration by 2% every 5 seconds. Yeah, you can't complain with a base passive regen. We like that. That's a big thing in the game. I mean, I'm thinking if we had these talents from day one, when Artificial Core allowed the NDAs to be lifted, when people were complaining about health and mana regen, I think there would have been a completely different outcome, a completely different opinion of the game just from this alone. Because this shows that you can have that base resource regeneration if you choose to. You have to make that choice, but it's there potentially. So yeah. Okay, Mana Siphon. Damage dealing abilities restore 2% of the damage dealt as mana. So that's a pretty good one, actually. Just good for resource management. Concentrated Power. If the character remains stationary for 3 seconds, their abilities are enhanced by 15%. That's not bad, actually. I like that one. These are all pretty good. I think I would go for this 2% regeneration every 5 seconds, though. That's just me. Basic, standard, consistent, and reliable. Okay, tier 5, we have Temporal Rupture. Effects that deal magic damage over time do not apply periodic damage. Instead, they deal 130% of the total damage to the target when the effect duration ends. That's a good one. That's a good one because it could lull someone into a false sense of security, and then all of a sudden you just rip their world from underneath them. Because as I've mentioned in when referring to a previous talent tree, that people will often back off when their health drops below a certain level, and then the abilities that affect people with low health are less useful. With this one, people will be dead and they won't know that they're dead, so they won't think about backing off and focusing on preservation of life. So that Temporal Rupture is quite an interesting one. So long as your damage over time abilities are strong enough to give that pop of damage at the end, then that one will work really well. Now we have Chrono Cascade. When using an ability, reduces the remaining cooldowns of other abilities by 1 second. Okay, that one's a good one as well. That one's a really good one. I think, though, given that it's a flat 1 second, this would be more useful for people with lower cooldown abilities in general. So if you can bring your cooldowns down and then having that flat reduction, then that's useful. If you've got large cooldowns, 2-minute cooldowns, 1 second is not a lot because you don't have a lot of abilities to use in the first instance. So you got to be thinking, right, I'll be reducing my other abilities by a maximum of 3 seconds or whatever. And then Focused Assault. Each character's damaging ability used on the same target increases the damage of the next ability used on that same target by 5%. The effect stacks to 5 times and lasts for 7 seconds. If an ability is used on a different target, the buff expires. So this is very similar to previous ones where it's specific target focused buffs, and I don't object to that. So this is actually going to be really useful for if you're fighting larger, beefier mobs and ones that have got a lot of health, so larger but fewer mobs. That one's good. Maybe not as great against the smaller mobs, but still, it's got its uses. It's 5%. It's going to build 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So that's all right, that one is. And I'm assuming that the timer resets every time that you cast an ability, so you should be able to maintain that damage on the bigger targets. And I mean, if you're on 1v1 PvP or any PvP in general, then you might be able to put out a lot of damage. So there's some really good choices there, and I'd struggle to pick. Maybe Focused Assault. Yeah, probably Focused Assault would be my number 1 and Temporal Rupture would be my number 2. It's a difficult choice. Ultimately, it comes down to the hero that you play, really. That's the key factor. We can't really theorycraft too deeply without having the main character and understanding their abilities to sort of decide which one's the best. But we do what we can with what we've got. So yeah, the casters out there, which ones would you pick? How would you build and which character would you use, and how would you build it? Okay, now we have the tank, which gives you a 10% maximum health. So tier 1, we have Stalwart Defender. When the character has less than 50% health, he receives 10 armor and 10 magic resist. So while I don't agree as much with these health related things, I think 50% is a little bit more reasonable to consider this as an ability. When it gets down to the low percentage healths that it kind of bothers me. So that one I think is a viable choice. Retaliatory Surge. After entering combat, the character will reflect 100% of the first incoming damage. See, this one would be fun. This one would be fun if you had an assassin, someone who is absolutely tooled up with all of the burst damage, where you've got the 50% increase from stalking in the shadows, and then the one that gives you the 50% extra damage, and then all of a sudden they come up from behind, and then they backstab you with all of that burst, and then boom, it just returns all that damage to them. I would wet myself if I was just sat there, farming mobs, and someone came and attacked me and they just exploded because they crit for a massive plus 100% damage. That would make me laugh a lot. I mean, tell me that would entertain you, right? If you were the tank stood there and that happened, no one could find that not hilarious. And on that basis alone, this is probably my number one choice on this particular one. That's so fun. Okay. Battle hardened. Every 2 seconds out of combat, the character gains 1 armor and 1 magic resist up to 10 stacks. Taking damage, the player loses 1 stack. Okay, so this one's actually fun as well. This is very similar almost to how the legionary works. And because the legionary can build up stacks when he attacks, he builds up armor stacks, and this could be like the sort of the buffer between when you have 0 stacks from your passive to full stack. This could be helping you maintain those high armor numbers through the absolute full duration of the battle. So this one, I think, definitely the funnest concept. This one's very kind of worst case scenario. Probably wouldn't opt for that one generally. Battle hardened, number 1, number 2, number 3. Yeah, that's my choices for that one. These are all good for any scenario, whether it's PvP or PvE, I reckon. And this one is definitely a PvE related one, but not that it's useless anywhere else. These are all good all-rounders. Okay, so tier 2, shielded defense. Taking magic damage grants a magical shield for 10% of the character's maximum health. Taking physical damage grants a physical shield for 10% of the character's maximum health. Cooldown 3 minutes. I don't like large cooldown abilities. It seems very inconsistent, and I don't like to rely on something like this where you're thinking, I can't get into combat now because my passive hasn't reset yet. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like consistency, and I like expected outcomes. Protector's presence. So armor and magic resist are increased by 5 for each ally champion nearby the character, which is 20 meters. So a maximum of 3 stacks. So that's actually pretty good. If you're playing in a group, 100% that's really useful, because you're going to get a maximum of 15 armor and magic resist just by playing in a group. That's bonkers. That's really good. And menacing aura. For each enemy nearby, the character gains 3 armor and 3 magic resist, up to a maximum of 6 stacks. So realistically then, let's compare these two together. So 3 armor and 3 magic resist. So you can get to a maximum of 18 extra armor and magic resist against enemies. Or if you've got allies near you, you can get a maximum of 5. So 15, sorry. You can get a maximum of 15. So straight away, this one is lower than this one to begin with. And I'm inclined to say the menacing aura is superior to this one. This is definitely your S tier, this is your A tier, and this is like your C tier. Just simply because you get more armor. And if you're in a group, let's say if you're in a group of 4 and there's no mobs around you, you've got armor which is being used for nothing. If you're in a group of 4 and you're against a group of mobs, then you've got potentially lower armor overall, but you've got armor which is being used for something, if that makes sense. I know that this will be used in combat as well, but the potential here is greater, and so that's why I'm struggling to explain it. I mean, someone might need to articulate that better for me in the comments, because that doesn't sound like it makes any sense whatsoever. But in my head it does. This one is the superior option, just because of the potential for more. Okay, so tier 3, we've got Bulwark. All critical strikes dealt to the character have a reduced critical damage multiplier of 50%. Well, I mean, that says it all really, doesn't it? Your critical strikes are reduced. So definitely a good one against assassins with the high critical strikes. They're not going to do as much. And just to go off on a bit of a tangent, the more I read through all of these different talents, the more excited I become, because of the complexity and the way that all of these things kind of intertwine and one thing offsets another. And you're going to find that there's going to be no simple meta that people are going to follow, because there seems to be, it's like, it's not just rock, paper, scissors, it's a whole web of intricate things that this counteracts this and this balances against this. So everyone's going to be incredibly unique when the game actually finally launches. And right now we've only the ability to use just simply two of these passive talent trees, whereas we're going to have 3 upon release. So this all excites me. This gets me really hyped and really, I just can't wait. I really can't wait to play this game so much. Sorry, I will get back to I'll get back to what I was talking about. So after being critically struck, the character gains a buff that amplifies incoming healing by 5% with a maximum of 30%. The effect lasts 5 seconds. So this is really good for playing within a group. So when you've got I'd probably say PvP related as well, but definitely group play, because you need that incoming healing from someone else, and depending on your class, not necessarily going to be self-healing. So it's an interesting one. It's not my favourite so far. Right, Indomitable. After being critically hit by an enemy, the character cannot receive critical hits for the next 5 seconds. That one's alright as well, actually. It depends how frequently we're going to be critically hit, though. So I think this kind of tells us a lot about what to expect in the game. Keen, when we're thinking about like the assassin branch and taking into consideration which of those talents are going to be useful, we need to also be thinking like, well, Artificial Core have said that you can't receive any critical hits in the next 5 seconds. 5 seconds, although in MOBA terms is a long time, it's not in MMO times. That's a very short period of time, right? So to have 5 critical hits incoming, to have multiple critical hits incoming in 5 seconds, seems like they're telling us there's likely to be heroes out there that are doing a lot of damage to you very, very quickly. So this one could be a very viable option to choose, especially if you're worried about those assassins. So for me, it's a toss-up, to be honest with you. I think I'm favouring Bulwark, but difficult. Right, so on to tier 4. So we have Juggernaut. This increases the character's maximum health by 10%. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's the kind of thing that I like. Just a straightforward, simple, predictable stat, but we'll see what comes up. Tenacity reduces the duration of crowd control effects on the character by 30%. It's a good one because no one likes CC. And Vengeful Souls. For each enemy killed, the character gains 0.1% maximum health. All stacks are lost upon death. So very similar to the damage ones we've seen previously in the Mage and in the Warrior. Gain extra stats for killing stuff. Again, you need to be, for this one, you're going to have to be killing 150 creatures, mobs, enemies to be able to obtain that 15%. So generally speaking, this one, the Juggernaut, feels better for me, but really it does come down to how quickly you can kill stuff, doesn't it? How quickly you can kill stuff. And like, if you were sort of progressing through like just the wilderness, killing creep camps, right? I don't think this is going to be beneficial for you, just because if you've gone through 150 mobs and health hasn't been a problem, then why do you need 15% extra health? It don't feel like that scenario you're going to use it. But then if you're working your way through a dungeon, for example, to get to a final boss, then maybe that's going to be beneficial for you. But then what if you die to the final boss? Then you come back. I mean, if you can run straight back to that boss, then you've not got your 15% health. So I think the risk of this one is not reasonable enough. The risk outweighs the benefit. Whereas with your Juggernaut, the 10% extra health, it's consistent and you know where you're at with that. So my vote there is Juggernaut. So finally on tier 5 we have Last Stand. So when receiving lethal damage, character has a 50% chance to avoid the attack. So Last Stand, when receiving lethal damage, the character has a 50% chance to avoid the attack. Additionally, the character regenerates 30% of their missing health over 10 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 5 minutes. So this is very similar to previous ones that I've complained about. I don't like cooldowns on passive abilities. I hate them. You can't predict the outcome, not without too much micromanagement of, oh, is my cooldown done? Can I go in? And the other thing as well is like, it's a 5-minute cooldown for a toss of the coin. So 50% chance that I'm going to die, 50% not, and then it goes on a 5-minute cooldown. No, I don't like that. That's rubbish. Like, tell me if I'm wrong, right? Am I looking at this the wrong way? Someone correct me, right? That's crap. Why would you pick that? Don't get it. I mean, it sounds great, the fact that, you know, it can prevent death and regenerate health, but nah, I don't like the fact that it's a 50% chance. That doesn't seem to work with me. I think it needs to be a guaranteed prevention of death. Okay, so we've got Stoic Endurance. So while under the effects of hard crowd control, the character restores 2% maximum health per second. Okay, that's good. Pretty simple, straightforward. You get stunned, you regenerate health. No problem there. Delayed pain. If the character's health falls below 20%, all the damage taken in the next 5 seconds will be absorbed and dealt over 10 seconds as a damage over time effect. This effect can only occur once every 3 minutes. Again, the 3-minute cooldown, it doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I do like the idea of the damage over time. That's good. Yeah, we like that. We like it being delivered over time, so it allows your healer to get in there and keep you alive. That's great. I like that concept. Prevention of death. Love that concept. But the 5-minute cooldown and the 3-minute cooldown, I don't like. There needs to be a way that they can maybe nerf this a little bit and remove the cooldown or reduce the cooldown so it's a little bit more consistent. And the same for this one. You know, great stats. I mean, I like that concept, but I don't like the cooldown. Maybe I'm just being a little bit needy. I don't know. But I think definitely this Stoic Endurance, probably one I would pick. That being said, like the delay, it's so hard to pick. They've all the other talents have been good at tier 5. This one on the tank, I feel it's just, I don't know. I'd probably pick Stoic Endurance, but it's a hard choice because of the benefits of these. Then I don't know. Delayed pain maybe. Yeah, Stoic Endurance has been my pick. That's a hard one. What would you pick in those situations? How would you build your tank? So, okay, Hunter then. This gives you 10% attack speed. So, Heroic Surge. When the character's health drops below 50%, their attack speed is increased by 10%. You know what I'm going to say about this one. I'm not even going to say it. Relentless Assault. Auto attacks against the same target increase the character's attack speed by 1%, stacking up to 10 times. The effect lasts for 3 seconds or fades if the character changes targets. We can see a theme here with a lot of the design for these abilities. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we can see there's a common thing. You know, focus on one target, get an increased output of whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's damage, whether it's attack speed, whether it's healing. That's the kind of the theme for a lot of these abilities. So Swift Onslaught. After 10 seconds of entering combat, the character gains 10% attack speed 10 seconds. Again, it's a similar kind of concept to previous ones. I have no objection to that whatsoever, and I think they're all interesting. That, you know, I don't think you can go wrong with any of these really. The Relentless Assault is probably the best one, I'd say. Definitely better in PvP than it will be in PvE, but not to say that it's bad in PvE either. Swift Onslaught, PvE, great. Clearing camps, smashing. Heroic Surge, you know my feelings on that. Okay, tier 2. Feline Reflexes. Increase movement speed by 7% for 5 seconds after using abilities. That's going to be a really annoying PvP trait. Leaps and Bounds. After movement impairing effects fades, the character's movement speed increased by 7% for 5 seconds. Okay, so I guess this is really useful for CC that is designed as a gap closer, so that it will allow you, if you've been routed to the spot, to allow someone to come to you, then this will allow you to disengage quickly and keep them at arm's length, which is interesting. Actually, it's interesting. Unshackled. Gain immunity to movement impairing effects for 2 seconds after using a dash ability. Does not remove the effects, but it halts them for 2 seconds. Okay, so basically, if someone casts like a root on you that lasts for 3 seconds, then you're immune to it for 2 of those 3 seconds, but then on that 3rd second you get that root. So that's how I understand that. Does that sound like how that reads? Have I understood that correctly? Or does it mean that they're delayed for 2 seconds? So for the 3-second root, you delay it for 2 seconds, then it has the 3 seconds. My gut feeling is it's the first one, but we have different opinions. Let's have a chat. So tier 3, Explorer's Instinct, grants the character a stacking 1% movement speed buff for each 10 seconds out of combat up to 5%. Okay, that's pretty good. You know, it's a very, very good way to explore, and I've seen faster movement in previous tests, and it is joyous to watch. seeing an archer bound around like a gazelle was really, really magnificent to see. Predator's Vigor. Characters sense wounded target in a huge radius with the health below 30%. Does not work on targets within 20-meter radius. Activates once every 3 minutes. See, that was winning. That was absolutely winning until the 3-minute cooldown, because you can't trigger it when you want it. I'm assuming it just because it's a passive. It just ticks over and then it alerts you whenever the 3-minute duration's done. And while that is kind of good, but you can't control it, can you? So it might not be done at an optimal time. So it could be like 6 minutes before you track something. If you're hunting down someone from PvP that's fled and you want to hunt them down, and then the thing doesn't trigger at the right moment. It's just triggered before they've fled or something, and then you have to wait another 3 minutes before it'll trigger again. And 3 minutes is a long time to run away, so I don't like that. Escape Artist. If the character's health drops below 15%, all immobilization effects are removed. Cooldown is 60 seconds. So I think, given the situations that this would apply to, I think 60-second cooldown, although I don't like them, that's probably reasonable. So this one's good for combat, PvP combat. This one's good for PvE, plain and simple. Choose the one that is the most suitable for your playstyle. Okay, tier 4, Surge of Speed. If the character takes damage exceeding 30% of their maximum health within 3 seconds, their attack speed increases by 20% for 10 seconds. So similar concepts to previous ones, large damage, more damage output, plain and simple. Small but Mighty. If the character attacks an enemy with maximum health greater than the character's own, which is 2 times for monsters, the character gains 15% increase in attack speed against his target. Similar concept as previous ones. Thrill of the Hunt. For each enemy killed, character gains 0.1% to a maximum of 10% attack speed. All stacks are lost upon death. So 100 enemies killed to get that 10% buff on attack speed. So that's a difficult one to choose. I'd probably say Small but Mighty, good anti-tank, but basically useless if you're fighting people that are small. I think, though, you need to consider what the end game might look like. Is the end game shooting small trash mobs, or is the end game shooting giant 6-legged mech robot monster things guarding chest? So that's what I'd be considering. And tier 5, Sniper's Precision. Increased damage depending on the distance to the target. Damage is increased by 1% for each unit starting from 4 meters away. Okay, that one's cool. This is ensuring that you're keeping at range, and if you're maybe looking to do this one, then you're perhaps utilizing a lot of the other movement speed choices above. So that could certainly be feline reflexes, for example. That could be a good choice. Explorer's Instinct. Well, actually that doesn't apply to combat, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. Like, if you can get that movement speed up there and keep that Sniper's Precision up there, then you're gonna get a lot of bonus damage. This probably is more suited to the sniper class, which we're not going to see immediately, so we're not going to be able to test that specifically. The archer, I'm not sure what the sort of the range is on that, but I mean, if you're just getting free damage for standing further away, then bonus, right? Okay, so we've got Reach Mastery. For each skill used, the character gains charges. Upon reaching 5 charges, the next skill will gain 3 meters to its range of application. Don't like that. Variable range, when would that be? Why? Because you're going to have to come back into range and then go out of range, back into range, and I don't like that. I don't think that makes any sense. There probably is some scenarios which I can't even comprehend, but to me that doesn't seem like I can imagine a scenario where that makes sense. And finally, Stationary Marksman. If the character remains stationary for 3 seconds, their abilities and attack range increased by 3 meters. So this makes more sense, because if you have a sniper who can, from what I remember, the sniper, the dwarf character, they do remain stationary in order to shoot. So having this trait and having your range increased ever so slightly is only a bonus in that scenario. So definitely, I think these ones are trained more to the sniper class than the archer, but still, this one is probably I just can't get on board with that one. Definitely the sniper class, and then maybe the archer class, but that would work for the sniper class very well as well. So yeah, the ranged characters out there, what are we reckoning to this one? What's the build look like? Which ones are the ones that stand out? And finally, the last one that we have, number 8, is the Pathfinder. Plus 2% health regeneration every 5 seconds when there are no no allies around. This is a very telling passive there that we have. A passive base stat is that we get health when there are no allies around. So this sounds to me like this is going to be a solo player trait. Spoiler, it is. So Wanderer's Resolve. The character gains 5% damage reduction when no allies are nearby. Speaks for itself. You're a solo player, you get less damage. You take less damage, sorry. Self-sustenance. If there are no allies nearby, the character receives health regeneration equal to 0.5% of their maximum health per second for 20 seconds after exiting combat. I like that one. We like the resources. But with all the feedback that they've got from testers about having the better regeneration, is that going to make something like this basically worthless? Because if you've got health regeneration, there's got to be a point where it's like, okay, well, I've got enough health regeneration, do I need any extra? Like, I would have said this one would be phenomenal if you was, if the health regeneration was sat as it was, but we'll see. I do like that one though. I'm inclined to say I want that one over anything else, regardless of what the new health system and balance is going to look like. Okay, and finally on this first tier is Lone Wolf. When there are no allied characters nearby, the character gains 5% increased damage. So pretty simple. When you buy yourself, you get a choice of extra damage reduction, health regen, or more damage output. Those are the choices you got. Which one do you want to go for? Tier 2. Rejuvenating Essence. Healing and resource restoration received from consumables is increased by 20% and their cooldown is reduced by 20%. So your potions and things, extra benefit from them, use them more frequently. Resourceful Explorer. Upon killing an enemy, the character restores 3% of their maximum health and mana. That's a good one. That is. Eldritch Transmutation. When using alchemy consumables, gain 10% damage boost and 10% damage reduction for 10 seconds. I'm not a huge fan. I'd probably say Resourceful Explorer, probably the way I would go with this one. Okay, so tier 3, Cozy Campfires. All campfires have invisibility detection effects in 15-meter radius. Absolutely great for anti-PvP. If you're sat there, low health, by a campfire, and you have some assassin that leaps out on you with his massive burst damage, then you're going to see him coming. Now we have Flame Forged. After using a campfire, the character receives a buff that increases the character's primary attribute by 10% for 5 minutes. That's a good one. So whatever the primary attribute is, increased by 10% for 5 minutes for just using a fire. And Firestarter, 2 magic woods and no matches are required to create a campfire. This one's interesting. So you don't need the matches, you just need the magic wood. So in previous tests, we've managed to stack our inventories full of campfires and there's never been an issue before. Matches are easy to come by. So providing that's the same, I don't see the benefit of this. You'd have to be quite badly prepared, or if your excursion lasts much longer than what you originally expected it to, then maybe this is one for you. But otherwise, I think better value in either Flame Forged, which is great if you're PvE, or Cozy Campfires if you're worried about PvE. So I think my choice would be Flame Forged. Tier 4, so we have Desperate Escape. If the character's health drops below 15%, the hero becomes invisible for 1.5 seconds and can only activate once every 60 seconds. I don't know. It just seems a bit meh. Sneak Prevention. The character cannot be approached unnoticed. Therefore, all effects of attacks from behind from invisibility do not work. I like that one. It's going to stop them pesky assassins trying to backstab you. And Slow and Steady. Able to detect wards. Activates once every 30 seconds. Again, I'm not a fan of these two because of the cooldowns on them. They might be alright, but I think Sneak Prevention is probably the best. Slow and Steady is the next, and then Desperate Escape is the final one in that order. And finally, tier 5, Guardian of the Wild. Taking lethal damage, the character survives at 1 health point and granted a shield equal to 30% of their maximum health for 10 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 5 minutes. So yeah, similar to previous gripes, it's not the worst. I like the concept of the shield, and maybe I'm getting a little bit too precious about the cooldown. Maybe if I'm dying more frequently than once every 5 minutes, then perhaps I need to get good. So maybe I've been looking at this wrong, but that's kind of my gut feeling. Solo Survivor's Hunger. When there are no allies nearby and the character's health drops below 80%, 50%, 20%, they gain plus 3%, 6%, 9% vampirism. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of alright. It'll help you with a little bit of sustain. I like the fact that the top tier, it activates at 80% loss of, 20% loss of health, and slowly increases the amount of lifesteal as you get less health. That kind of works for me. And duration enhancement system. All positive effects, 1 minute duration or more on the character are stronger by 20% and last 40% longer. So that's not a bad one. It all comes down to what positive effects we're likely to be maintaining on a regular basis that have that 1 minute more duration. So generally speaking, you could pick any of these and it'd be alright. I think I'd probably go for Solo Survivor's Hunger. I'd rather be in a position where I didn't need to worry about dying because I've stolen life from people. If I'm in a situation where I've got to the point where I need the shield to be protecting me, then I'm probably not strong enough to be there, although there will be some few occasions where, it is beneficial to have it. Whereas if I can sustain in combat using vampirism and not get into the point of death, because if I get to the point of death on this once, there's a chance I'm going to get to a point of death for a second time, and if that point of death is in under 5 minutes, then I'm dead. Whereas if I can manage to sustain with this one, the Solo Survivor's Hunger, then I'm never going to get to that point of death. So if I'm supposed to be dead, I'll be dead. That's the kind of the outlook I've got on there. So yeah, so who are the solo players, the lone wolves in the game? Does this tick any boxes for you, and which choices would you pick? So yeah, that is all of the talent trees gone through in great detail. It's taken way too long to go through all of those. So if you've managed to make the end, bloody hell, well done. This has been a long one, and I think my voice is going. Yeah, so I think I am inclined to opt for Pathfinder because I do like to play solo quite frequently, and I think also the tank. These are the two things that I'm going to gravitate towards if I pick the Legionary. So we'll have to see. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment and we'll have a conversation. I'm really interested to see other people's opinions on these because there's so many different combinations that there could possibly be. I can't even comprehend the possibilities. But yeah, anyway, thank you for sticking by. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit that like button if you have, and if you want to see more Corepunk content, please hit that subscribe button. And for the love of God, I hope I put my microphone on this time because I've just spoken 2 hours straight.